Myles Garrett helmet swing, Browns versus Steelers. 2019. In November 2019, the already intense Browns-Steelers rivalry reached a horrifying new level when defensive end Myles Garrett and quarterback Mason Rudolph got into an altercation that would become one of the most shocking incidents in NFL history. What started as a routine play in the final seconds of a game spiraled into unprecedented violence. With just 8 seconds left and the Browns leading comfortably, Rudolph attempted a pass and was taken down by Garrett in what initially seemed like a normal tackle. But things escalated rapidly when the two players began grappling on the ground. Garrett pulled Rudolph up by his face mask, and as tensions exploded, Garrett ripped Rudolph's helmet completely off his head. In a moment that stunned everyone watching, Garrett swung the helmet like a weapon and struck Rudolph on the head with it. The blow connected with a sickening thud that echoed through the stadium. Chaos erupted immediately as players from both teams rushed in, leading to a massive brawl that took several minutes to control. Maurkice Pouncey, Rudolph's teammate, began throwing punches and kicking at Garrett in retaliation. The aftermath was swift and severe. Garrett received an indefinite suspension that lasted for the remainder of the 2019 season and playoffs, the longest suspension for a single on-field incident in NFL history. He was also fined over $40,000. Pouncey was suspended for 3 games, and Rudolph was fined but not suspended. The incident dominated sports media for weeks, with debates raging about intent, provocation, and player safety. It became a defining moment in one of football's oldest rivalries, forever remembered as the night the rivalry crossed a line that should never be crossed. Comment below. Which rivalry moment in NFL history shocked you the most? Deebo Samuel's helmet-popping hit. Cowboys versus Commanders. December 2025. Modern NFL rules have significantly reduced the frequency of truly brutal hits. But occasionally, a play reminds everyone that football remains an inherently violent sport. In December 2025, during a heated Cowboys-Commanders matchup, San Francisco 49ers receiver Deebo Samuel delivered a collision that instantly went viral and reignited debates about player safety. The play occurred during a crucial moment in a tight game. As a Commanders player caught a pass and turned upfield, Samuel came flying in as a defender with terrifying speed and power. The collision was perfectly timed and technically legal by current NFL standards, but the force was absolutely devastating. The impact was so powerful that it knocked the opponent's helmet completely off his head, sending it flying through the air like a missile. The sound of the hit could be heard throughout the stadium, and the crowd gasped at the sheer violence of the collision. Replays shown on the Jumbotron drew a mixture of cheers and concerned silence from fans who couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. The hit sparked immediate debate on social media and sports talk shows. Some praised it as an example of old-school, hard-nosed football, a clean hit that exemplified the sport's physical nature. Others argued that even legal hits of such magnitude raise questions about long-term player health. The player who absorbed the hit was eventually able to leave the field under his own power and passed concussion protocol, returning later in the game. Samuel's hit became one of the most replayed moments of the 2025 season, a reminder that even with enhanced safety protocols, NFL rivalries still produce moments of shocking violence. The incident demonstrated that the brutal nature of NFL rivalries hasn't disappeared. It simply evolved to exist within the boundaries of modern rules. Eagles versus Commanders brawl, December 2024. Just weeks before Samuel's viral hit, the NFC East delivered another reminder of its reputation as the NFL's most heated division. In late December 2024, the Philadelphia Eagles and Washington Commanders engaged in a brawl that resulted in multiple ejections and reignited one of football's oldest and most bitter rivalries. The game had been chippy throughout, with both teams exchanging hard hits and occasional late shoves after plays. Late in the fourth quarter, with the game still in doubt, a routine play near the sideline turned explosive. After a tackle that drove a Commanders player out of bounds, several Eagles defenders stood over him talking trash. Commanders players rushed in to defend their teammate, and suddenly punches were being thrown. What started as a few players quickly escalated into a full-scale brawl involving more than a dozen players from both teams. Coaches from both teams ran onto the field trying to pull their players apart, but the fight continued for nearly a minute before finally being broken up. The aftermath was significant. Multiple players from both teams were ejected, including key contributors on both sides. The NFL reviewed the footage and handed out substantial fines to nearly a dozen players involved in the brawl. The Eagles-Commanders rivalry, which dates back decades and has produced countless memorable moments, gained another chapter in its storied history. The brawl perfectly encapsulated why NFC East rivalries remain the gold standard in the NFL. Decades of history, genuine animosity, and the knowledge that these teams will face each other twice every single season, ensuring that grudges never truly fade. Players from both teams made it clear in post-game interviews that the rivalry was far from settled, promising that future matchups would be equally intense. The body bag game, Eagles vs. Washington, 1990. On November 12, 1990, the Philadelphia Eagles hosted Washington in a Monday Night Football game that would earn one of the most notorious nicknames in NFL history. This wasn't just another NFC East showdown. It became a bloodbath that left Washington's roster decimated and changed how people viewed the physical limits of football. From the opening kickoff, the Eagles' defense played with terrifying intensity and borderline recklessness. Philadelphia's defense, led by coordinator Bud Carson and featuring players like Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, and Seth Joyner, delivered punishing hit after punishing hit. Washington's quarterback situation became a nightmare as the game progressed. Starting quarterback Jeff Rutledge was knocked out of the game early with a separated shoulder. His backup, Stan Humphries, lasted only until the third quarter before taking a vicious hit that left him with a concussion. Washington was forced to use running back Brian Mitchell at quarterback for several plays because they literally had no other options. The Eagles didn't just hit players, they systematically took them out. By the end of the night, 9 Washington players had left the game with injuries, including 2 on stretchers. The Eagles won decisively, 28-14, but the real story was the trail of injured bodies left behind. Washington's season was severely impacted as they struggled to recover from the personnel losses. The game sparked intense debate about the line between hard-nosed football and intentionally injurious play. The rivalry between these teams, already heated, intensified even further with Washington seeking revenge in subsequent matchups. Decades later, the body bag game remains a dark chapter in NFL history, representing an era when player safety took a back seat to intimidation and physical dominance. The Bounty Bowl, Cowboys vs. Eagles, 1989. On Thanksgiving Day, 1989, America's traditional holiday football game turned into a scandal-filled spectacle when the Philadelphia Eagles faced the Dallas Cowboys in what became known as the Bounty Bowl. This game combined everything that made the NFC East rivalry legendary: hatred, accusations, and controversy that extended far beyond the field. Leading up to the game, Eagles head coach Buddy Ryan had developed a notorious reputation for encouraging aggressive, borderline dirty play from his defense. Cowboys head coach Jimmy Johnson accused Ryan of placing bounties on his players, specifically offering financial rewards to Eagles defenders who could knock Cowboys kicker Luis Zendejas and quarterback Troy Aikman out of the game. The accusations were explosive, suggesting that Ryan was essentially paying for injuries. During the game itself, the Eagles defense played with unmistakable intent to injure. They delivered late hits, targeted previously injured players, and celebrated when Cowboys players went down. Zendejas, who had previously played for Philadelphia and left on bad terms, was hit on 2 separate occasions by Eagles defenders after kicks, including one particularly vicious shot that drew a penalty. The Eagles won 27-0, but the victory was overshadowed by the controversy surrounding their tactics. The fallout was immediate and intense. The NFL investigated Ryan's alleged bounty system, but couldn't find conclusive evidence to support Johnson's claims, though many around the league believed them to be true. Ryan defiantly denied everything, dismissing the accusations as sour grapes from a losing opponent. The incident heightened the already fierce Cowboys-Eagles rivalry to new levels of animosity. The Bounty Bowl episode foreshadowed later scandals, including the Saints Bountygate scandal in 2012, which proved that such systems did exist in the NFL. It remains one of the most controversial moments in Cowboys-Eagles history and exemplifies how rivalry hatred can allegedly motivate truly dangerous behavior on the football field. Joe Montana knocked out. Giants vs. 49ers, 1990 NFC Championship. The 1990 NFC Championship game between the New York Giants and San Francisco 49ers represented a collision between the defending champions and a rising defensive powerhouse. The 49ers were seeking their 3rd consecutive Super Bowl title, but the Giants' brutal defense had other plans, culminating in a hit that changed NFL history. Throughout the game, the Giants' defense, led by coordinator Bill Belichick, systematically attacked quarterback Joe Montana with relentless pressure. Late in the 4th quarter, with the 49ers trailing and desperately trying to mount a comeback, Montana dropped back to pass and was hit by Giants defensive lineman Leonard Marshall, in one of the most devastating hits ever seen in a championship game. Marshall's hit came as Montana released the ball, and the impact was catastrophic. Montana crumpled to the ground and lay motionless for several terrifying seconds. He had suffered a broken hand, bruised sternum, and a concussion from the crushing blow. He was unable to return to the game, and his backup struggled to generate any offense against the ferocious Giants defense. The Giants won 15-13 and advanced to the Super Bowl, where they would defeat the Buffalo Bills. But the game's lasting legacy was the injury to Montana, which had profound consequences. Montana missed the entire 1991 season recovering from his injuries, and when he did return, the 49ers had developed a new young quarterback named Steve Young. Montana eventually left San Francisco for Kansas City. His career with the 49ers effectively ended by that single hit. The Giants. 49ers rivalry intensified following this game, with San Francisco seeking revenge in subsequent matchups. Marshall's hit on Montana remains one of the most significant plays in NFC Championship game history, a moment when physical dominance in a rivalry matchup changed the entire landscape of the NFL. Steelers versus Ravens bloodbath era, 2000s to 2010s. When the Cleveland Browns relocated to Baltimore and became the Ravens in 1996, few could have predicted that this new franchise would develop one of the most physically punishing rivalries in modern NFL history with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, these AFC North battles became legendary for their brutality, featuring bone-crushing hits, knockouts, and an intensity that made every play feel dangerous. These games were defined by middle-of-the-field collisions that sounded like car crashes. Hall of Fame safety Troy Polamalu and Ravens linebacker Ray Lewis led defenses that seemed determined to dominate opposing players. Quarterbacks on both teams took horrific punishment, with Ben Roethlisberger and Joe Flacco absorbing hits that would have ended lesser players' careers. The games frequently featured late hits, extracurricular pushing and shoving after whistles, and occasional full-scale brawls. Neither team backed down, creating an arms race of physical intimidation. The rivalry shaped both franchises and influenced NFL rule changes. The sheer number of concussions and serious injuries sustained in Steelers-Ravens games helped prompt the league to implement stricter rules about helmet-to-helmet hits and defenseless player protection. Despite the physical toll, both franchises thrived during this era, combining for multiple Super Bowl victories and establishing the AFC North as the NFL's most physical division. The rivalry proved that even in an era of increasing concern about player safety, there was still an appetite for old-school, physically punishing football when it occurred between bitter division rivals who genuinely hated each other. Deion Sanders versus Songs. Andre Rison Brawl, 1994. Not all brutal NFL rivalry moments involve entire teams. Sometimes the most intense feuds are deeply personal. In 1994, the ongoing war of words and on-field battles between cornerback Deion Sanders and wide receiver Andre Rison exploded into one of the most memorable individual player fights in NFL history, proving that personal rivalries can be just as fierce as team rivalries. Sanders and Rison had history. Both were supremely talented, flamboyant personalities who loved the spotlight and refused to be shown up by anyone. Their trash talk was legendary, with each claiming superiority over the other through media interviews and on-field taunting. When Sanders' San Francisco 49ers faced Rison's Atlanta Falcons, everyone knew fireworks were inevitable. Throughout the game, Sanders shadowed Rison, and their physical battles became increasingly aggressive. After one particular play where Sanders broke up a pass intended for Rison, the two began jawing at each other intensely. Words escalated to pushing, and suddenly punches were being thrown. Both players went after each other with genuine fury, requiring multiple teammates and officials to separate them. Both players were ejected from the game, and each received significant fines from the NFL. The incident became a defining moment in both of their Hall of Fame careers, forever linking them in NFL lore. The Sanders-Rison feud highlighted how individual pride and ego can create rivalries just as intense as historic team matchups. Both players later reconciled and spoke respectfully about each other in retirement, acknowledging that their competitive fire had occasionally burned too hot. But for that moment in 1994, their fight reminded everyone that football rivalries aren't always about the name on the front of the jersey. Sometimes they're about individual warriors refusing to back down. NFC West. Slugfests. Panthers versus Seahawks, 2014 to 2015. The NFC West, during the early 2010s, became known as the NFL's most physical division. And nowhere was that more evident than in the brutal playoff battles between the Carolina Panthers and Seattle Seahawks. These games represented smash-mouth football at its finest, with both teams built on dominant defenses and physical running games that led to absolute wars. The 2014 and 2015 playoff matchups between these teams were particularly savage. Both defenses featured future Hall of Famers and Pro Bowl players who delivered punishing hits on every play. The Seahawks' Legion of Boom secondary, led by Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, and Richard Sherman, was notorious for violent collisions. The Panthers countered with linebacker Luke Kuechly and a defensive front that matched Seattle's intensity. Games between these teams featured minimal passing and maximum violence, with running backs taking tremendous punishment and quarterbacks under constant pressure. These games influenced how the NFL viewed defensive football in the modern era. Both teams proved that even in an increasingly pass-happy league, physical defense and power running could still dominate. Their playoff battles drew massive audiences who appreciated the throwback style of football, even as it resulted in numerous injuries. The Panthers-Seahawks rivalry helped establish the NFC as the stronger conference during the mid-2010s, with both teams making Super Bowl appearances. The rivalry demonstrated that brutality in football doesn't always come from cheap shots or dirty play. Sometimes it comes from two equally matched, supremely physical teams simply refusing to be beaten. The Ice Bowl aftermath violence. Packers vs. Cowboys, 1967. While the 1967 NFL championship game, known as the Ice Bowl, is primarily remembered for its sub-zero temperatures and Bart Starr's legendary quarterback sneak, the game also featured brutal physical play that set the tone for the Packers-Cowboys rivalry for decades to come. Played in -13-degree weather with a wind chill near -50, players on both sides dealt with frozen equipment, numb extremities, and field conditions that made every hit feel twice as hard. The extreme cold eliminated any cushioning effect normally provided by pads and equipment, turning every collision into a potentially bone-breaking impact. Throughout the game, players delivered and absorbed punishment that would have been difficult in normal conditions but became almost unbearable in the Arctic temperatures. Several players suffered frostbite, and many more dealt with hypothermia symptoms. Late in the game, as the Packers drove for the winning touchdown, the physical intensity reached its peak. The famous final play, Starr's sneak behind Jerry Kramer's block, was as much about physical dominance as it was about play calling. The Ice Bowl created a rivalry legacy that emphasized toughness and mental fortitude above all else. Both franchises used the game as a measuring stick for decades, with players expected to match the toughness displayed in those frozen conditions. The physical toll on participants was enormous, with several players crediting that single game with shortening their careers due to cold-related injuries and the extreme physical punishment. The game helped establish the Packers as the dominant team of the 1960s, but also elevated the Cowboys as a franchise that could match Green Bay's physical intensity. The Malice at the Meadowlands. Giants vs. Eagles, 2010. The Giants-Eagles rivalry has produced countless brutal moments, but the 2010 matchup at the Meadowlands stands out for its combination of shocking violence and controversy that epitomized everything that makes NFC East football must-watch television. From the opening kickoff, this game featured an unusual level of aggression, even by NFC East standards. Both teams were battling for division supremacy, and the intensity showed on every play. The Eagles' defense delivered hit after hit on Giants players, several of which drew flags for unnecessary roughness. The Giants responded in kind, with their defense matching Philadelphia's physicality. One particularly controversial sequence saw a Giants defender deliver a late hit on Eagles quarterback Michael Vick that sparked immediate outrage from Philadelphia's sideline. Eagles players rushed onto the field, and a near brawl ensued before officials restored order. Later in the game, a helmet-to-helmet hit on a defenseless receiver resulted in an ejection and sparked another wave of shoving between both teams. The Eagles won in dramatic fashion, but the physical toll was evident on both sides. Multiple players left the game with injuries, and several more were clearly hobbled by the fourth quarter. The NFL reviewed several hits from the game and issued fines to players from both teams. The game reinforced the Eagles-Giants rivalry as one of football's most intense, with both teams circling their next matchup on the calendar and promising revenge. The Malice at the Meadowlands became another legendary chapter in NFC East lore, a reminder that sometimes the most brutal rivalry moments come not from a single play but from an entire game where violence and intensity never let up. Raiders vs. Broncos. Monday Night Massacre, 1977. The AFC West rivalry between the Oakland Raiders and Denver Broncos reached a boiling point on September 19, 1977, in a Monday Night Football game that became known for its extraordinary violence. This wasn't just football. It was warfare under the lights with a national audience watching in shock. The Raiders, known for their intimidating style under Al Davis, came into Denver with a reputation for playing on the edge of legality. The Broncos, tired of being pushed around, decided to match Oakland's physicality. From the opening kickoff, players engaged in brutal hits, late tackles, and constant after-the-whistle confrontations. The game featured multiple bench-clearing brawls, with the most notable occurring in the third quarter, when a particularly vicious hit sparked an all-out fight involving nearly every player on both sidelines. Helmets were used as weapons, punches were thrown with genuine intent to injure, and officials lost control of the game for several minutes. The Monday Night Massacre changed how the NFL approached game management and player discipline. Multiple players were fined and suspended following the game, and the league implemented stricter protocols for officials to control escalating situations. The Raiders-Broncos rivalry intensified dramatically, with subsequent matchups featuring heightened security and additional officials. The game became a cautionary tale about allowing rivalry intensity to spiral into genuine violence, yet it also cemented both teams' reputations as the toughest in the AFC. Which of these brutal rivalry moments shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more NFL history content, and hit that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown of the most savage moments in football rivalry history.